everybody. It's Chris with my son Drew, and we're going to read a book, one of Drew's favorites. It's called Moosetache. Right.
And it's funny.
And it's funny. Moosetache
Ew.
by Margie Palatini and illustrated by Henry Cole. Whoa. That's a lot of hair. To my dear with the 5 o'clock shadow, MP. To Dan, Caroline, and Jim with love, HC. Moose had a problem. A horrible, hairy, prickly problem. It grew right below his nostrils and just above his upper lip.
Right there.
A moustache.
Stop it.
Can you do moustache?
Moosetache.
Mustachio.
Okay.
Now, not a few spare hairs or shy little stubble. No mere weak, wandering whiskers on the upper lip of this moose. No siree. Moose had a big, bushy, bristly, mighty moustache. But a moustache that was burly, surly, mangy mess, and it itched a lot.
My daddy's funny.
Sure, he plucked, and he tweezed. He even clipped, snipped, and teased. His combs were still cowards, and his brushes rebelled. His scissors simply surrendered.
What's the surrender?
What's the what?
What's the surrender mean?
Give up.
Give up. Surrenders. The scissors give up.
Yeah. Moose was in a frenzy, a frizzy tizzy. The moustache was completely crimping his style. He was a great hoofer, but he could barely bop and hip-hop with a moustache going flip-flop.
Flippy. Flappy. Why is Mom doing the dishes?
He was a wonderful chef, but he simply could not flambe his souffle with all those whiskers in his way. And he was a daring skier, but how could he downhill race with the mighty moustache blowing in his face? Moose had to do something, and soon, but what? What do you think he had to do? After days and days of much serious thought, Moose got an idea. He crossed some hair here, he crossed some hair there. He tried his moustache around his neck. A moose scarf seemed to be the ideal answer to his problem. It was so simple, so easy, so perfectly perfect.
I'm sweating.
But then his moustache got knotted and mangled and horribly tangled, and those hundreds of hairs still prickled and tickled. Worse, Moose could barely take a breath with all of that moustache wrapped around his neck. So, Moose untied, unwrapped, unknotted, and gulped in some fresh air. He got another idea. He parted some hair this way, he parted some hair that way, and he heaped all that moustache on top of his head. Moustachioed antlers seemed to be the ideal answer to his problem. It was so simple, so easy, so perfectly perfect. Until a squadron of squirrels and one very nosy gopher moved right in to that moose motel.
Now look.
Oh my goodness.
He's going to grow like you.
Yeah. They hurtled and huddled and hoarded, furrowed in and burrowed out. Needless to say, it became quite crowded up there on Moose's head, and heavy and messy.
There's costume up there.
Yeah. And very, very noisy. The squirrely chitting and chatting, squeals and squawks woke Moose every morning before the crack of dawn. And that gopher was giving that mouse one hairy headache. Moose needed his sleep. He needed his rest. He needed his privacy. "Mustachio there's nuts," said Moose. So he unparted and unpiled, untwisted and untwined, and said adios to those hairy horns.
Adios, Daddy.
Adios, Drurio.
Adios, you're funniest.
Yeah. But now what? What? The miserable moose took hold of a hunk of hair and he wrestled it. Then roped it, he tethered, tied it, tamed it. Ah, a moose tail. Now that was so simple. That was so easy. That was so perfectly perfect. Talk about a dizzy-do. Moose didn't know if he was coming or going, backward, forward, this way, that. He didn't know which end was which. Moose had to bail on the tail.
Bail on the bail.
And so he thought, and thought some more, but no other idea was worthy a winner. Braids were a bother, a moustache sweater too sweltering. Next, not. Poor Moose. His problem was truly terrible, unbearable, just downright sad. He felt so alone, he didn't know where else
Why
to do.
couldn't he just do the nets?
I don't know.
That's easy.
Is that easy?
Look, you can just put it in there.
Of course, Moose had to ask, how did she
Skip the
do
page.
what she...
Skip.
I did skip a page.
Yeah.
It stuck.
See?
Yeah. Then, call it fate, call it destiny. It was probably dumb luck. But one day Moose tripped on his moustache and just had no time to duck. Oomph! Pardon me, they both said as they bumped. Then they blinked, then they stared, and then their hearts went thump, 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 thump. She was a moose with a bouffant so bodacious, outrageous, well, it was just plain old big. Hair after hair piled higher than high, a skyscraping dew of glorious curls, a tower of swirling twists and twirls. She was simply splendid, stupendous, and absolutely superb. Of course, Moose had to ask how she did what she did to get such a dew. Miss Moose winked and then whispered, "Just a little glue." So she helped he fearlessly plunge a hoof into a fat pot of that white, gooey goop. And carefully, oh so carefully, they glopped, and they plopped, they pasted and they pressed, they coaxed and curled every truly unruly wayward whisker. Around and around they tweaked and twirled those horrible hairs until Moose's once mangy mess was now a wondrous winding wave of marvelous moustache. Moose gazed in the mirror and smiled a broad moosey smile. He was so happy, so glad, so giddy with glee. He looked dashing and handsome. Moose gushed, "Is that really me?" Mm-hmm. With not a care for one hair, the moose paired boogied and bopped. They skied downhill, even uphill, and their cooking was hot, hot, hot. So, of course, it wasn't long after that Moose and his moustache and his beautiful bride foxtrotted and tangoed and waltzed down the aisle. Good hair days, bad hair days. They vowed to love and to cherish. And with hearts heaped with love and pots filled with goop, they both sighed, "I do," glue, and promised to never part. It was so simple, so easy, so perfectly perfect, and it stuck.
Look at their baby. And their baby.
Yeah.
And their baby.